You're welcome to this week's edition of the Electoral Reform segment. I am Adebanke, Ilori, Oyeniyi.
Ariyo, Dari, Atoye.
This week we'll be discussing the seemingly reluctance of the National Assembly to pass the new Electoral Act. We'll also be talking about electoral violence and how it affects inclusion, and our conversations with the current Deputy Senate President on electoral reforms. It is unfortunate that at this point we are still talking about the passage of the Electoral Act, of the new Electoral Act, despite our clamors and engagements with the legislature.
Banke, I think a lot of Nigerians are concerned. There have been mounting pressure on the National Assembly to fulfill its own commitment to have this law passed this year. The chairman of Senate Committee on INEC, Senator Kabiru Gaya, had promised that the committee was going to give a definite statement on I think November 30th. October 30th. That has come and passed. We didn't get any to hear anything from him, and now we have just a few days to the end of this of 2020, and it appears hope is fading about us having this law passed this year. But all hope is not lost, and I think that this kind of platform also provides us an opportunity to further call on the National Assembly to please pass this law this year. Nigerians don't want partisanship again to be the undoing, of this act, just like what we witnessed during the 8th session of the National Assembly, and it's really going to be something very concerning for us. And I think one thing we should be expecting from the National Assembly when they resume next week is to give us a definite commitment in terms of timetable, which I know they can do, in terms of this is when we are going to have a public hearing and this is when this will be passed. Let us have this definite commitment so that Nigerians can, at least be sure of what they are actually doing.
Particularly with the issue of inclusion, in the course of the week, we had the 1-year remembrance of the late Salome Abu, who was a woman leader in Kogi State. She was burnt alive in the 2019 Kogi elections last November. Unfortunately, the call for justice is still ongoing. The perpetrators haven't been brought to book. And this reiterates the concerns with respect to how electoral violence affects the inclusion of women in politics. So what are your thoughts on that?
Back at first, I think for us on this program, I think we'll continue to commiserate with the family of Madam Salome. May I also continue to rest in peace. And we're also praying that there should be justice. Justice should be done. And it's unfortunate that, how many months, 1 year down the line, we've not seen anything, on the part of government to bring the culprits to book. However, I think this is also a good reminder for us, even though it's a very sad incident, that we should, do everything to get rid of electoral violence. And this doesn't all go well for our elections. We need to put everything in place. That's why we're also clamoring for electoral reform, because part of the electoral reform is also to bring the electoral offenders tribunal, through necessary legislation. And those are part of the commitment. And I believe that the event during the week must have given the people another opportunity to call on the National Assembly to do the needful. And this should also be a reminder to the National Assembly that, look, we need to get all our electoral processes sorted out such that we can have free, fair, credible elections. When we have this, definitely we're able to reduce incidents of electoral violence. A lot of Nigerians are victims, not just those who are died. What about those who are injured? We also have even who have suffered economic loss. And it's quite unfortunate just because we want to elect, some of our leaders, and it's quite painful.
Yes, electoral crimes would always be crimes against the people, unfortunately.
Crimes against humanity.
Yes, crimes against humanity, in fact. And it is really sad that the dynamics of electoral violence with respect to how it affects women has not really been considered in the system, in our electoral system. So what we are looking at, what we are hoping for with respect to electoral reforms, is a strong framework to ensure that this doesn't happen again and perpetrators of electoral violence are brought to book.
And in addition, this is also one of the reasons why we are recording voter apathy. Yes. Because a lot of women who ordinarily should have come out to vote, young people, including even older people who are scared that what is the essence of me going out to cast my votes and talks, just show and unleash terror on us. So if we're able to address this, and I think this is one thing that President Buhari should commit himself to doing, as a departing gift for 2023, and not just that, we still have some off-season election, Anambra, Ekiti, and Osun, including some by-elections. So this is very, very important that we need to sort out the issue of electoral violence in our elections.
Yes, I'm aware we had some discussions with the legislature.
Yes, during the week, we actually hosted the former Deputy Senate President, Senator Ekweremadu. Interestingly, with my sister, who is in the studio this morning, Osasu, Igbinedion, we had this wonderful chat with him about, no hold bar, talk about issue of electoral reforms, about youth and women inclusion, and I think he bared his mind. And let us have a snippet of that discussion. Will you, on our behalf and on behalf of young Nigerian women, be telling the Senate to ensure that they pass this law this year as a commitment, to Nigerians, and also to ensure that those very important sections and items, which were contained in the one passed by the 8th Senate and which have also been identified that can strengthen women, youth, inclusion, and all of that, that they ensure that we get all of them done before they leave, either by way of motion or by way of advice to the National Assembly when they resume term.
I was at the retreat they had in Lagos, and also part of the commitment to have this. This was, I think, in February, to have the Electoral Act passed before the end of the year. Regrettably, this COVID thing showed up, and then we couldn't do much for like 6 months. So it's going to be unrealistic unless we just want to do something just to impress Nigerians, for anybody to say that the Electoral Act should be passed this year. What I think that we should do is probably the first quarter could be a commitment that's more realistic if we want to do the correct thing, for 2 reasons. One is that, remember that most of those things are things we passed in the 8th Senate, so we're only just bringing them up again. But because the society is dynamic, there have been a number of new issues that needs to be accommodated. All right? So I recall that the issue of electronic voting, I think the 6th Senate, I think the 2010 Act, I was part of the authors of that Act. Section 52, which specifically said that we can use the Electronic Act. When we brought it, the committee brought it to the floor of the National Assembly, it was in the Senate, it was heavily opposed. In fact, when we said, okay, let's remove, they said, no, we're not removing, we should add that it is prohibited. So we had to add the word prohibited in it. So 4 years down the line, the dynamics changed. We have more parliamentarians who are more receptive to the idea of electronic voting. So that section 52 will now amend it further under my watch to say that INEC can use electronic voting. It was signed by Jonathan. So somehow, for some obvious reason, they couldn't use this in that 2015 election. So when they started talking about, how do we get electronic voting, some of them forgot that it's already part of our electoral system, as I speak to you now. So even the one act we are trying to do now, we are only bringing it back to the new act, but it's already in existence as part of our electoral system. So I believe by next quarter, we should be able to deal with it.
Thank you for joining us on today's edition of the Electoral Reform segment. Remember to follow us at Center for Liberty on Twitter or at New Voices NG on Twitter. You can also send your comments and contributions through these platforms. Till we come your way next week. Bye for now.